Hi, I'm Abimbola. Let's take a look at your first set of essays. Okay, this is one about schools. Let's see what you wrote. A number of people believe that education should be made enjoyable for the students, while others argue that the major reason for attending school is to learn. Therefore, there is no need for entertainment. Although schools are meant for learning, it is necessary to make learning interesting for both the teachers and the pupils. Otherwise, schooling would become boresome, and this can hinder learning, understanding, and assimilation. I therefore agree with the idea that schools should be more entertaining. All right. On the whole, it's good. It's appropriately developed. You've rephrased and you've done stuff like that. Let's talk about where you could have improved this introduction. I'm not really a huge fan of this sentence for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's rather long. It's about 3 lines long. And basically, while complex sentences are a very good idea, it's also important that they're not so complex that they lose clarity. Okay? So be careful with this kind of thing. Because look what you did here. Essentially, you've got this clause of contrast where you've got this although, and then it is necessary, and so forth and so forth. Here's where I think you should have split it up into a second sentence, starting with otherwise, okay? Because otherwise is now starting a totally different idea, and it probably should have been its own sentence, okay? The other thing is about the overuse of the word learning in that sentence. So look, even though they are meant for learning, it is necessary to make learning interesting. So there are a lot of ways to fix that. You could have used a synonym. You could have you could have done something to make it look like you were doing this on purpose. So, for example, although schools are meant for learning, it is necessary to make this learning interesting. So just doing that shows an awareness that, yeah, I know I'm using the same word, but I'm doing it very, very much on purpose, okay? And then here again, you've got hinder learning. So you can see that it's a little too much of the same word. So try to be careful with that. There are other words you could use, all right? And other techniques like using cohesive devices like pronouns and so forth. All right, so let's move on now. Firstly, a complete education is not solely about books. It also entails learning and development in other areas like physical, mental, and intellectual. All right, so you don't mean sorely. Obviously, you mean solely, so you have the wrong word here. Okay. And we don't say that, you can't say that physical is an area, okay? So maybe here you should have put another noun at the end, because you don't say the physical area, the mental area, the intellectual area. All right, that's the wrong word here. So, I don't know, it needed a noun after intellectual. For instance, the physical aspect can be developed through activities like sports, which include athletics, soccer, football, handball, and others. Also, for mental and intellectual growth in students, tasks like quiz competitions, debates, word puzzles, and project works can be encouraged. All right, what's your point? Remember that we're not talking about making schools more holistic and more kind of varied in their approach. So it's not about academic versus other maybe different methodologies, but rather it's talking about a very specific type of alternative to traditional education, which is entertainment. So what you need to do here is to show us in this paragraph that the activities you are suggesting are entertaining, okay? Not just that they provide an alternative, but in fact that they are entertaining. And remember what we mean by entertaining, because it's very easy to misunderstand what is meant here. Remember that entertainment means fun, amusement, enjoyment. Okay, so these are the things that you're supposed to be proving here. Let's move on. Secondly, the human body and brain require, and it should be no S here because these are 2 things, a period of rest and relaxation at regular intervals, no A here, to prevent fatigue after an intensive time of studying. For example, the brain tends to shut down due to prolonged ED periods S of studying concentration, leading to fainting attacks S, as well as inability to assimilate. Hence, for students to understand and assimilate, again, you've got the same word really too close together. Lectures should have leisure and pleasurable moments, S, in between for students to laugh and smile. Okay, here you are talking about entertainment, but it does feel a little underdeveloped. You're basically explaining to us why we need to have entertainment, okay? But you haven't really shown us how that can be done. I feel like this is really somewhat underdeveloped. Also, in terms of the logic about it, I think maybe this should have come first, but that's a detail, really. I feel like there was more you could have said here to develop, like what kinds of suggestions you have and what kinds of things would help. I don't know. I'm not really very thrilled with the way this is. About the way you developed it. It's just you're basically justifying why we need to have entertaining activities. Not really much else. Okay, so let's move on. Lastly, the main purpose of school is to educate. Meanwhile, entertainment too is also part of education, but it should not be more than reading. In other words, learning without amusement and entertaining can cause frustration. However, both need to be balanced for complete education to take place. Okay, now this has really confused me, and let me tell you why. Because in the end, this is supposed to be basically a kind of a recap of what you've talked about in both your body paragraphs and your introduction. And yet all of a sudden in your conclusion, you're bringing about this new idea here that, look at this here, it should not be more than reading. Well, if you have this position, then you really needed to develop a paragraph about why academic learning is so important in school. Okay, rather than just having this first, secondly, what you should have done, if this is how you genuinely feel, is the concession paragraph where you talk about the value of a purely academic education and how important it is that these elements exist in a school. So I'm a little confused by this, okay? Because here you say both need to, but you never really justified that part of the story, okay? So it's a good attempt overall. There were also some grammar mistakes, but for me, there were other things as well. I mean, like I said, your task achievement needed a little work here, and I think I've given you some ideas of how you should approach it. At least I've tried to give you some ideas. There were consistent grammar mistakes, not too serious, but still enough for me to notice them and say that, this did have some mistakes. Vocabulary was okay, but it was a little repetitive. Okay, so you had a lot of the same words, like in a very short distance from each other, and that made it feel not very rich in terms of vocabulary. All right, so let's move on to your second essay. Let's see what you did in that one. This is about the enjoyable activity with a child. So, engaging a youngster in pleasurable activities will enhance the development of good and positive imaginative abilities and power. All right, I'm never a huge fan of the word good. There are certain words in IELTS essays that I prefer never to say. Those words are good, bad, nice, big, and small. They are so elementary and they say so little, whereas there are so many other far more descriptive words that are far more precise and really show a higher level of vocabulary. So let's try to avoid this word. Okay, leisure activities ensure relaxation of the body and brain, which will enable the child to see beauty in things. Meanwhile, books are written based on an individual's imagination too, which the child may not understand or appreciate. I therefore agree totally with the idea that having an enjoyable time with the child enhances, with an S, creative skills and ability. Okay, fine. So you totally agree. Firstly, a child's, apostrophe S, brain is tender. Well, we don't really say that. That's not really a collocation that a brain is tender. Nonetheless, and most times is occupied with activities that involve, no S, playing, running, and handling objects which challenge their imagination, no S, and curiosity. Hence, these activities should be encouraged and they should allow They should be allowed. No, what are we saying here? These activities should be encouraged and... All right, careful here, because this they, I thought you were talking about the activities, so it's creating some incoherence here. And children should be allowed to enjoy their childhood without being loaded with reading, which requires thinking and is meant for mature minds. Okay. This isn't entirely how you should have been addressing this paragraph. What you should have done instead here is, I mean, this starting point is not bad, but you also need to talk about alternatives, like what kinds of enjoyable activities can develop better skills, and what are those better skills, okay? So it feels underdeveloped. It feels like you didn't really have any evidence. You didn't really have any support for your evidence. So definitely underdeveloped, okay? I mean, what you say is linked well. I have no complaints about that. But you have to bring it back to this idea of enjoyable activities. Give us some examples of what they are and explain to us what kind of skills they develop. You didn't do any of that here. All right, so secondly, there is beauty all around in the works of nature, and walking around to see and touch flowers and insects like butterflies stimulates the child's interest in nature, and the child can, or you could have said he, she, or they, can develop skills, S, and creative ability from such. Full stop here. This is also a good way for adults, S, to rest and reduce stress, and will equally expose a child from a young age to the importance of rest and relaxation. Furthermore, engaging children in creative activities like painting, no S, walking, music, and dancing is another form of positive creative activities that are vital for physical and mental development of the child, and as such can be developed into a skillful character. Careful. It's as if you're saying that these activities can be developed into a skillful character. Careful with your grammar here. Lastly, most professional artists develop their creative skills from a tender age as a child, while some of them get their inspiration, no S, not from reading, but from enjoyable activities that enhance, careful with your spelling, not enchants, their imaginations. I therefore agree that doing a pleasurable activity, no I-E-S, it should just be Y, that the child enjoys, no E, can encourage a child to develop better skills and be more creative. All right. You definitely talked about creativity. You talked about imagination. I see that quite a bit. You didn't really talk about better skills. I mean, where did you talk about that? Maybe curiosity, maybe, but that's not really what was intended here. I mean, you should have been talking about better skills. I mean, you could have talked about, you said painting at one point. Well, you could have also talked about how painting develops fine motor skills because you have to learn how to handle a paintbrush. When you talked about walking and dancing, oh, you did say here physical mental development. Yeah, but it still needs to be a little more direct, okay? What kind of skills does this help you develop? So I wanted you to really flush that out a little more, maybe that it develops, more endurance, physical endurance. It develops physical strength. So you needed to kind of flush these out a little more and make it clear what you're talking about. I told you that I didn't really agree with this first body paragraph and the way you developed it. So I'm going to encourage you to really stick to the template a little more closely, especially here in the beginning, until you get the hang of creating essays that, how can I say this? Pretty much follow the topic development that they should be following. All right, so what comes next now? The other thing I want to tell you that I liked some of the grammar here. It was nicely written. There were some places where you had some lovely higher level grammar, and that was really nice. Yes, so good job for your first set of essays. Okay, there is some work to be done, but that's, to be expected at this stage. So now what I want you to do is correct these essays, return them back to us corrected, begin an error correction list where you write down the mistakes you made. Next to each mistake, write down what the corrected version is. This is something you'll add to with each essay correction you get back. And then, of course, send us your next set of essays as well. Try to do this within the next day or so to really apply everything you've been learning. So we'll meet back here with your next set of essays, and I wish you lots of good luck.